Good evening, and welcome to the Writing Gals, where we're four sweet romance authors talking about writing and all things publishing. I always want to say we're four sweet authors, which we are. We're very sweet authors, but we're sweet romance authors. And just as we always do, we talk about what we're doing so you can keep track of us and where we're at in our publishing career and writing. So, Judy, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you're doing?
Okay. So I am waiting for my book to get back from my editor, trying to be patient. I'm hoping to have it in the next few days, and then I can publish it hopefully next week. And then also I have started my fourth book in the Ridgewater High series. Last week I'd said that I'd, written my first chapter in that, and well, Tuesday I read it to my critique group and it didn't go so well. So I restarted and got rid of all those words, which was kind of hard, but I got over it. And so today I wrote a new first chapter and part of a second chapter. So I hope that I won't have to delete too much more.
So, but do a quick little something about your launch strategy for this book because it differs from what we talk about.
Yeah, so for my book that is coming out hopefully next week, I decided to try a pre-order and to also release it $2.99 just because I've watched the young adult books, like the top 100 for a long time, and I've noticed that the books that have done the best and stayed the stickiest the longest, they have released at $2.99. And so I'm just going to try it, see if maybe that helps. I don't know if maybe it helps the readers take it more seriously or something because it's a higher price. So I'm just going to see. I have no idea. It's my little experiment. And I'm going to compare my different launches because, my other ones I did release at 99 cents. This one is new and it's just going to be interesting to see how it does. And I did the pre-order because I wanted to experiment with that as well.
Well, I wonder too, it's about market expectation. And I think YA is such a heavily dominated, traditionally published market that people looking for YA are used to pre-orders and are also used to $2.99 or higher in terms of release. So that's not such a shock. You look at Clean and Wholesome, which is dominated mostly with indie released right now with indie published or authors. And so we have kind of set that standard for Clean and Wholesome, where it might be harder for us to do a pre-order or, because most romance readers, they want it now. Give me my book now because I want to read the romance. And so, and there's a lot more. I was talking to someone because I'm going to do my YA series soon, and they were like, it's such an underserved market. I think it's not as popular. So I think you can get away with more because I know you've been telling me check out these YA authors, and we've been watching, and their books are just staying at like $1,700 in the store at $2.99. You're like, how are they doing that?
Yeah,
they are making bank.
Yeah, they've been there for like 4 months, and I'm just like, how? So I'm going to try it too and hope for the best.
And most of them are not people that have like tons and tons of books and have, that have like things that in it. But
like one of them, it was their second book that did it, and they didn't have a newsletter list. They didn't have, like, I don't know, they just got really lucky or something, or their book is just amazing. So I don't know. So
well, and I think it's also your proof of reaching out to other authors and asking questions and saying, how did you do this? And it's always frustrating when they're like, I don't know, it just did it itself, like, good luck. Try and copy me when I don't know what to copy.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's going to be exciting to watch because we're always all about testing and trying something new. And YA market's going to be different. So, and the Clean and Wholesome market where you don't maybe not necessarily get as high in rank, but you also stay higher, faster, longer, and at a higher price. So,
yeah.
It'll be exciting to watch what you do and how it works for you, and then to me decide, no, I don't think so. It's nice to have the guinea pig be somebody else than me.
Hopefully it'll have great results.
It'll be awesome. We're excited. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, Victorine, tell us what you're working on.
All right. Well, I just finished my reader magnet. It's a story called My Sister's Fiance, Her Sister's, yeah, Her Sister's Fiance. And it's a cute little story. It's just a short novella, but it's a cute little story about a girl who had to be the wedding planner for her sister's wedding, and she's in love with her sister's fiance. And so I put it up on my website at victorineliski.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter there and get it free.
So my question for you is,
yeah,
you have said that you struggle, or the idea of writing a romance in 13,000 words seems daunting. How did you feel about that when you wrote it?
well, okay, so I love all the scenes that you cram in there where they're talking to each other and getting to know each other. And I just sort of I cheated in this one because I couldn't put so many scenes in where they're getting to know each other. So I skipped 6 months ahead in the middle of it because I wanted the readers to know they've spent 6 months, pretty much dating, even though she doesn't want to date him. You have to read the story to figure out why. But so I skip ahead 6 months so you can figure out they've been getting to know each other and really falling in love within those 6 months. So you get the initial excited feelings from the beginning, and then at the end you get the really strong feelings because they're really in love with each other and they don't know. She feels super guilty because he broke up with his fiance because of different reasons, but she feels like it's because of her, and so you have all that angst and stuff at the end.
Yeah,
so
totally.
To make it short, I had to skip over a bunch of scenes I normally would have put in there.
But do you feel more now like you could tackle a novella, and now that you did it that way? Because I remember you were like, I don't know.
I would like to try novellas. I'm worried about my audience thinking they're too short, and so that's why I haven't. But yeah, I've written shorter things. I hesitate to put out, like maybe a 40,000 word book instead of 50, because I feel like that might feel just a little short for my audience. But I don't know. Maybe I will if a story just feels like that's more right.
And I think most people who are going to do a short story or a novella like that, second chance romances are really the best, because they already you get through that awkward meeting and talking to each other, and you can just kind of jump right into the romance because they've already figured things out.
Yeah, they know each other. Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. And then you're starting another billionaire book.
Yes, I'm working on another one. I'm actually I'm about 15 to 16,000 words into it right now. It's my billionaire one where he broke out of prison.
So she's going a suspense route with that one.
He's on the run. It's a little bit more suspenseful, but it's kind of funny.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear it in critique group, because that's where I hear it. Awesome. How about you, Michelle?
I have been driving myself crazy. That's what I've been doing.
Besides, it's your birthday. Happy birthday to Michelle.
Birthday. Yes, it is. And I told myself for my birthday I was going to spend some time writing today, and it never happened. And so I'm currently frustrated. I'm a frustrated writer. But that's okay. So I spent 3 glorious days at my mother's house visiting, so the kids could spend time in the pool, and in the downtime I got so many words written on my mermaid book that it is almost done, and I'm kind of really excited. That's like such an oxymoron. Okay, so I'm very enthusiastic about our topic tonight because I just went through the saggy middle problem with this book. But as I'm getting close to finishing it, I'm realizing that I have such a huge mountain to climb marketing-wise with this one, because it's a new genre, and I'm starting over, because I can't at all count on any of my contemporary readers following me over. And so I don't have my newsletter, I don't have my fans, I don't have a lot of things. And so it's a little bit scary, but I believe in the story. I think it's really going to shine for those who find it. I just got to figure out how to help more people find it. I am working on my next contemporary series too. It's mostly in the outlining stages, but I have written about 4 or 5 chapters in it, and it's going to be so much fun. I also just got those master classes. I was telling the ladies earlier that was kind of my birthday present. Um, and it wasn't just the writing classes I wanted to take. I got the all access pass. I'm going to be watching Christina Aguilera's and Usher's and all of their stuff because I want to see what they say about performing and what it's like to brand yourself as a musician and just see what they have to say because I want to pour all of that back into my rock star story. So mostly I'm just having too many things going on. I'm also collaborating with my Regency House party people. We are getting ready to publish all of our stories that we have been putting out as serials, chapter by chapter, on our website. And that is a challenge, and it's also really fun, and we're excited to be getting those out in September. And so it's kind of neat because I feel like I've been working on a lot of different things and accomplishing nothing as far as getting stuff out. But it's like books are going to be raining from the heavens this fall as they're all kind of coming out about the same time. So it's going to be a little bit crazy. But that's what I'm working on.
So are you going to publish them as a set, or do you publish them individually? How's that going to work?
So right now we are publishing them individually, and we are branding them together in a collection, so to speak. So we are all going to be sharing, the same branding on our cover and coordinating each other's releases as far as marketing and newsletters and just all that sort of stuff, kind of like we did with the Destined for Love thing. And then we're trying to figure out all the business logistics if we wanted to do a box set with the whole anthology down the road, which is a little bit more complicated, but something that we're looking into possibly doing. But yeah, so it's fun.
It'll be interesting. You'll have to report back of how that worked for you in terms of because a lot of questions I see sometimes on Facebook, our group was like, well, what do you think about group, sort of like what you're talking about, where you publish kind of all in the same town or you publish all in the same this or that. So it'll be interesting to see. Like Destined for Love.
We're publishing in the same house.
Yeah. So you're really personal. I think that would be crazy. I have a hard time keeping all my characters straight. I couldn't imagine trying to be like, this person looks like this, but they're in their book, they're not in mine. That just seems like, too much, way too much organization.
It's been a massive experiment, and it has taken a lot of coordination between the 5 of us, and it's actually been pretty amazing how well things have worked out story-wise. And it is one of the challenges that our stories are so intermingled with each other, and our characters are all in each other's books, that now as we're trying to publish them as individual titles on Amazon, we have to go in and edit them to make it work for that venue versus what it is on our website. So we like to encourage people, if you want the whole experience, go now and read it as it is on our website. But when it comes out online, our readers, I think, will still be interested to see what we've done with the story there, because we are going to have to add some and take some and edit some. So it'll be slightly different.
And we were talking before we went live, and Michelle has an awesome business idea for anybody who can sew and take pictures. So
yeah. Oh, you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. If people are interested or want a side hobby, this is something that will definitely make you money.
Yeah. So actually, one of us is actually thinking about doing this as a business, but as many people as possible can do it, and there will be a market. We need Regency stock photos, people. All you photographers out there, costume designers, and I don't know, entrepreneurs, we need Regency stock photos in this world. We just do. There's not enough out there. There are a lot of historical authors, and the number of stock photos for any historical novel, whether it's World War II or Western or medieval, I mean, you name it, there are just not enough stock photo sites out there for this market. So
when I think in terms of clean and wholesome as well, you can get a
Yeah.
lot of like bare-chested men in kilts, but you can't none of like the full. And you know, maybe it's easier that way too and cheaper because they don't have to make the whole outfit. They just have to make the kilt, and then everything else is done instead of making like
Yeah,
all the other stuff.
but do they have to reimburse their models for the spray tan and the waxing? I
Probably.
mean,
It's like an occupational hazard. You just have to have that happen. Well, exciting. I want to go and read it, but I don't know if I like the idea of reading it on a website. I like to read it in a book form. So I'll have to decide which one I want to do with my mounds of time that I have.
What is the website?
It's regencyhouseparty.com. Real
Awesome.
simple. Yep.
Awesome. Well, for me, are you done? You good?
Yes, I'm done. Take it away, Amy.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Well, as always, I've got lots and lots of stuff going on in my life. I've been having to deal with some personal outside issues that have affected everything in terms of writing. But I hit my first salmon month, which was my one goal for this year. So I'm pretty excited about that. A little terrified that it's never going to happen again, but we'll just see. And I know for sure that becoming a six-figure author is something I want. So I'm going to keep pushing hard to keep getting those, you know, salmon months, which is $10,000 or more. And so I released Marrying a Billionaire, and that got to 203 in the store, which is awesome. It's the best I've ever had it. And I think it's a testament to rapid release. The more you release, the more people are looking at you, the more people see you, the higher you stay, the less you have to market. So all those things. So terrified that it's going to go down next month. I'm rapidly trying to, or very quickly trying to put out or finish my next book in my marriage series, Marrying a Prince. And I got, like Judy, me and Judy, Tuesday was an awful day. I had a lot of stuff going wrong on Tuesday, and it was just not a fun day. I like gained 4 pounds when I went to Weight Watchers, and then I got told that 10,000 words of mine had to be scrapped, and then I had this huge emotional breakdown. I believe bad things comes in threes. So that literally Tuesday was the worst day for me. But like, anyways, I'm not here to complain about my life, which is starting to sound like I am. So anyways, 10,000 words I had to scratch. And so then I had to start over again. But they are much better words, much better plot, very excited about it and where in the direction that it's going. So I'm almost to 15,000 words now. And so trucking along, trying to do about 5,000 words a day to get that done and published. And then once that book is published, I will focus on my YA books and then finish writing those 2 in the series to rapid release the 3. So it's kind of like Michelle. I'll have a book and then it'll probably a little bit longer before I have my 3, and then it'll be like raining books at that point. And then I'm trying to think, you know, most of my money that I made this month was from my marriage books. I would probably say maybe 1,000 of it was made from my billionaire books. So I would definitely, if you're looking at writing a book, don't necessarily do what everybody else is doing, because it almost makes me wonder if the market is getting flooded with billionaire books and people are wanting to see a little bit more diversity in the books that they have out there. So look at a common trope, decide one that you would like to write in, and then do that. Because, I mean, out of 10,000, 1,000 of it was from my 5 billionaire books. It just seems...
Do you remember people used to ask us when we first started our podcast, will there ever, you know, will we saturate the market? And we were like, we don't know. We have no idea. And we just did not have any idea that so many people were going to put out billionaire books. And, you know, it's nothing about the quality of those books or how awesome, and so many of them are performing really, really well. But it's always about what readers want versus how well it's being served as to how well you can be successful in that market. And so even though the trope is still really, really strong and really popular, it is really well served right now.
Right. And now I'm not saying everyone go out and write a married book. Don't do that. Find a trope. There are so many tropes. We have a whole podcast that talks about popular tropes. Find one that you enjoy and write a series with that trope. And if you think, you know, not a lot of people have it, but it's a popular trope, then write in that trope. So this is kind of where you have to be creative in finding something that you enjoy. Now, also, clean and wholesome is a highly served romance. Adult romance is a highly served genre. So the idea that my books are always going to stay high in rank is probably not like logical thinking. And so it's just a natural progression that as books get older, they're going to go farther down. So that's why putting out books constantly all the time, more regularly in terms of our market is more important than, let's say, a fantasy market, a sci-fi market, or like even a YA market. So just keep that in mind. But that's pretty much what I'm doing. Very exciting things. Just, you think, okay, I just have to get through this book. I just need to write this book and then my life will get better. Or things will get easier. Not that I'm saying my life is bad. And then you finish that book and you're like, no, I've got 5 more books to write. And it just never stops. It never slows down. So, all right. So let's talk about how to avoid that saggy middle. And I have to say, I love that you put saggy middle because that just makes you think like,
I was relieved we were talking about writing and not the fact that I've had 4 kids and used to be a cookie baker. You know what I mean?
Okay, everyone stand up and show your midriff to the world. No, that's for people who meet us personally. They get to see all that. Right now, you just get to see our beautiful little heads and shoulders. Okay, so besides your body, why does a book sometimes get a saggy middle? So what is a saggy middle? Victorine, why don't you give us that definition?
All right. This actually came from our Facebook group when I asked, what do you guys want, to hear about? And I didn't write down her name. Somebody posted about, what do you do with when your middle starts to sag? And I take that as when I'm writing and I feel like, my characters, all they're doing is just going to the restaurant and eating together, like over and over and over again. What is happening?
Have told Victorine.
To this middle?
We have told Victorine.
Stop going to a restaurant and eating.
And I have met Victorine's husband, and he is all about eating. I love that. Not that he's like a giant person, but he just loves food. And so I think she like takes some of that and she like puts it in her books because Victorine will always have people eating.
There's always food in there. So the saggy middle, I think for me, my middle starts to sag when I lose track of my conflict, when there's not enough tension between my characters. That's when my middle starts to sag and I lose focus on where am I going? What do I need to have happen? I need that rising action. And in a romance, that rise has to become because of their the conflict with their relationship. With other books, you can have all kinds of other rising action having to deal with, dragons and explosions and stuff like that. But with a romance, it has to be their relationship. And so if my characters start, just kind of liking each other and there's no tension between them anymore, then the whole thing falls flat. And I feel like that's when I get the saggy middle for me. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Judy, do you have any pearls of wisdom?
Oh, well, I'm just going to say I agree with that. Definitely the saggy middle just kind of happens when there's nothing new happening. Your characters always need to have goals that they're working towards to, keep the plot moving forward instead of, I ate a granola bar today. I made some lasagna.
Now I got to go delete my 15,000.
So yeah, you don't want to like put the boring stuff in there. Just always have something happening.
We all know the characters go to the bathroom. We don't need to discuss.
Yeah, we don't have to write about it. Like my first book, it was like, oh, I did this. They don't need to do their to-do list. You don't have to do a step for every little thing that they do in their day. So yeah, just try to keep things more interesting. Have things pulling the characters apart and pushing them together. Have some other, conflict arise from other characters or other events, and yeah.
Awesome. Michelle?
Okay, so this is what I've decided is my problem. It's that I start out with the beginning where it's compelling and exciting meeting the characters, and I know the exciting part that I want to get them to, and then the middle part is where you're kind of waiting for the right timing to get to that exciting part. You know, like you kind of feel like all these things have to happen and time has to pass, especially with romance. Um, and sometimes you just got to be like, okay, no, something's got to go now. Like we have get this moving. And that's how you get, you know, your saggy middle in real life to tighten up, right? Is to get moving. Um, you gotta you gotta jump on that suspense. You gotta keep it coming. Keep things happening. And if things aren't happening, then you have to just say, okay, as a writer, I have to change course. Something's got to get these characters moving in a way that's interesting. And so to kind of illustrate that, so my book that I'm currently working on, the conflict needed to happen, all leading up to this very specific event that was happening at the full moon, right? And so I said that the full moon was in 2 weeks. Well, all the things that I had outlined to happen happened in like a few days, and then I had like 10 days still, or 8 days until the full moon, and I was just sitting there like, okay, things are getting boring. Nobody's really doing anything. They're just having conversations a lot. So what do I do to fix this? And I just went out and I cut out all the days simply by going back and saying it was only a week until the full moon. Changed the whole, you know, pacing. And that's generally what we're talking about, is pacing and keeping everything moving quickly. And so all of a sudden their time frame was a lot shorter, a lot tighter, and a lot more tension and suspense was built into it because of that. And it might not be timing that's your problem. But you just got to figure out what is it that's keeping my characters from doing something interesting now. And then a good idea, after you figure out what it is to figure out, okay, so what do I do to fix it? And I think that that's what we're going to talk about with some of our answers coming up, right?
So I taught a suspense and tension class at the LDS Beta Readers online course, not this year, but I think it was last year. And I did a lot of research in terms of suspense and tension. And I think tension is what causes, if you don't have tension, you have a saggy middle. And you know, one of the great stories that you can use in terms of like looking at how people plot things out is like Lord of the Rings, right? The first book. I don't know what that one's called. What is the first one? Do we know? I don't know. Anyways, okay. You can research it.
I don't know.
No, The Hobbit's like the one he wrote.
Is it the Fellowship of the Ring?
Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes,
maybe?
yes. So if you think about it, they talk in terms of like story and plot. So you have your first story or your first problem that your protagonist faces, and normally at the end of that they come out triumphant. So the first part that Frodo is affected with is Gandalf coming and saying, you need to leave the Shire. So at the end of that, he leaves the Shire. That's the end of the first act, or the first battle he has to do. But then there's a war that's going to happen. So when we're talking about the saggy middle, it's like, okay, the battle's been won, we know, but now we know what's going to happen in the future. He's going to have to overcome this. He's going to have to take the ring to Mordor, right? So can you imagine if the entire Lord of the Rings was them walking through the woods to Mordor? Like, that would be the most boring book ever, where you have a couple conversations, blah, blah, blah. So what do? Now here is where you start, you know, chasing your protagonist up a tree and throwing rocks at them. And you make it more and more conflict. What do? We have, you know, crazy flying, I should not use not genre appropriate, like my genre examples. I don't even know what they're called. What are the screeching things? What are they called? That come and try. So we throw that at them. And then we have Gollum at him, and we have people dissenting against him, and we have wars and all of these things that are making it impossible for him to get to Mordor. That is what makes it an interesting story, because the entire time you're like, is he going to survive? And so for me, in the saggy middle is because the tension of the I have to know, is this going to happen, has just kind of fizzled out, and it's boring. So you have to, if you're getting to that point in the saggy middle, especially you as a writer, because you're like falling asleep, ends for pages and pages. Michelle.
It's a different letter every night. I keep it interesting. Last night it was K. Just saying.
She falls asleep at her keyboard and she must push a finger down, and then she gets pages of one letter. It's like my favorite thing. Anyways, but if you feel like, and I've even said, something's wrong. I mean, there's something is just not working, and you're like, I'm bored. If you're bored, your reader's going to be bored. Okay, so now we have beaten to death what a saggy middle is. So what do you do about it? Wow, don't everyone speak at once. Victory.
Silence. Sorry. Okay, so my favorite thing to do is to find something that I get excited about. So in romance, I get excited about maybe a possible kiss or a flirty moment between the two of them, or maybe a touch of a hand, or something that can happen, some moment that can happen between my two characters. And so I plan that out and build up to that, and then I have my scene that gets me really excited. And so I try and bridge my favorite scenes in between with some increasing tension between that, because the moments you have that are flirty, that's drawing your characters closer together, but then you have to push them apart as well, and that's where more of the conflict and tension comes in. And so that's kind of what I do, but I write romance, and so that's pretty strict in what you can do in the saggy middle. I can't have aliens show up in my romance and cause something interesting to happen that way. So with other stories, other genres, I would say you need to look at outlining or brainstorming, getting some ideas of what you can do, and look at some story structure books and try and figure out where you went kind of askance from where your story structure should be.
And I think if you lose sight of what, because I think a lot of times saggy middles happen because they're overtaken with side plots that don't necessarily have to do with the main plot of the story. So if it's a fantasy, or if it's a sci-fi, battling the alien ship, or, keeping, I do not write these genres, so I'm just like shooting from the hip here. So, but I mean, like keeping, what is the main goal? And if you're feeling saggy, let's bring it back to that time. With that being said, you want to make sure we don't have the overactive middle, where it's just, you have to have the balance of action, 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 and then some calming, and then come back up, action, action, action. So you want to be careful that we're not like, we'll just make them suffer and torture them. You're going to exhaust your reader. Judy?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say with the how to, find something to do. One thing I've heard, is to think about what the worst thing is that could happen to your characters right now, and then do that. So that usually helps a little bit. Or like, what's the most embarrassing thing that could happen to my character? Just something that would just be horrible for them, and then make it happen and see how they respond.
Michelle?
Yeah, so this is basically where you're throwing rocks at your character a lot of times, but if you look at most plot structures, they also need to be having victories along the way too. So that's where it really helps to be able to look at something like a diagram, or something that can help you visually see that they do need to be having small victories, and they need to be having defeats, and it needs to keep going kind of back and forth, always compelling them towards the major fail and the major victory, right? And that's what happens in a well-paced novel, is that you kind of have this give and take that propels you ever steadily towards the climax. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of books that I've been reading lately, and I have been reading a lot more in the fantasy genre lately, oddly enough, is that the slow parts, the parts where I lose interest and start becoming bored, are those sequel scenes. So people talk a lot about scene and sequel, And basically, scene is where the action happens, and sequel is basically where you talk about the scene, or so there's some sort of emotional moment after the scene. There's a calming down, and that's kind of what Amy was talking about. So they get to these more sequel scenes and just kind of like stay there. It's like it's quicksand, and they just kind of get stuck. And they're usually in fantasies where there's trying to fill in characters on what's been happening, right? So in fantasy, you usually have a wide cast and a lot of things going on, and then everybody gets together and has to tell everybody what's been going on. And that's always really tricky to do because the reader already knows all that stuff, right? And so it slows you down. Nobody's doing anything, and all the suspense that you've been building up through the whole story just dissipates. And you have to start from scratch. Suspense is kind of like a rubber band, and you pull it and you pull it and you pull it, and the more you pull on that rubber band, the more tense it gets. But as soon as you let up, you have to start all over again, building the tension up. And so you have to be really careful with those sequel scenes that you don't lose that tension and that conflict, and you don't get stuck there.
Mm-hmm. Like one of the most frustrating thing is trying to read a book where the characters are just unnaturally talking to each other to inform the reader. That drives me crazy. Because I'm like, there's no way people would sit around and be like, so why are you doing this? Oh, you know why I'm doing this. And then 5 paragraphs into why I'm doing this. It's like, they know this about each other. It just almost feels like an interruption from the author just to tell you what's happening in the story.
Yes, and I'm so fascinated by dialogue in general, and especially in romance, dialogue is so important because it's what's driving their whole relationship in so many ways. What they're revealing to each other, what they're not revealing, all that kind of thing. And I think that to pick up your tension and your pacing in dialogue, it's so easy to just throw something in there. Maybe it's something you weren't even thinking about, some kind of secret that they reveal, some kind of just, you know, bomb into the middle of this conversation and see how it shakes things up. And that's what's kind of fun about stepping back from your story and trying to figure out where things have gone wrong. And then, like Judy talked about during the brainstorming and figuring out the worst thing that can happen. Well, you can figure out 6 really crazy bombs to drop in the middle of your story and write, 500 words and see where it takes you. And you could do it 3 or 4 times and find the one that's most interesting. I always think that's a lot of fun, and I've done that before where I've just rewritten a scene with a few different bombs and seen what shakes things up the best, not like the most, because it's not usually you want to like make the biggest impact with what change you're making, but what has the most interesting change and what is most effective for what you're trying to achieve. So experiment.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
we had a great comment from one of our watchers. DK Finn said, stimulating the reader's curiosity is key. And he said you can start up a subplot and leave the reader hanging on as to what's going to happen with that. And I think that was a brilliant comment because, yeah, if your readers are interested in what's going to happen, they're curious, or there's a mystery you've introduced, then you're going to keep your reader interested in it.
Mm-hmm. Although I would have to say I have read a book that switched between different points of view, and it actually, because I read it for the romance, because obviously I'm a romance writer and I love romance, and so I was just so into this one couple story, but every so often she would break and have like 3 or 4 chapters in a different person's perspective, and it would just frustrate me because I'd be like, I don't care about those people, go back to the romance, to the point where I'd just be like, oh, I have 4 chapters to read till I get to the romance, I'll just put my book down. And it took me forever to get it, whereas in the first book I just devoured it in a night, and then by that 3rd book I couldn't stand that back and forth. So you kind of have to play. And that's when knowing what you're writing and what your reader expectation is going to be is important. Because I think if I was as a fantasy and not really so much a romance, I think I would be interested in both of those, or sci-fi. But I was just reading it for the romance. And then like, well, maybe you shouldn't have written your romance so good, because then I was like, why aren't I getting more romance? It was frustrating. But that's a good idea. And I was going to say something else, but I don't remember what it was. So obviously it wasn't that important. So what's your favorite story structure book, lecture, or resource? For me, it's Victory. No. It's my writing group. Honestly, my writing group is, and I honestly think in this day and age where we have so much availability and we're so much in action now we have Netflix, you can binge watch. To me, I study a lot of movies because they have to move you along, like scene, because they have such a lot of story to tell in such a short period of time. I like, my husband will sit down and try and read my kids the Chronicles of Narnia. Oh my gosh, I'm like, this is so boring. It's like a page of like what this tree and the woods and the snow looks like, and I'm just like, oh, get on with like a part of that era where I'm like, bam, bam, bam. So if you're feeling like frustrated, find like kind of, for me, find a few movies or something that are in your genre and study what they do and how they keep the watcher and the entertained, because they have, they don't have as much time as a writer could have to engross the reader. They just need to keep you moving along. So go watch movies. That's my my response. Good movies. Some movies are not so good.
Yeah.
How about you, Judy?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I was gonna, like, mine kind of goes along with the movie thing too. Like, I really liked K.M. Weiland's 5 Secrets of Story Structure. It was just like a really quick read. I think it might be free on Amazon right now. I don't know. It's just like a really short thing. But I was like trying to figure out story structure a couple years ago, and it wasn't like getting into my brain really very well, because everything I'd done before had just come like naturally or whatever, and I was trying to just finally nail down that thing, and so that really helped me a lot. But I do like that she talked about how you can watch movies to get an idea of the story structure. And she actually has like a post on her website or a section or something that I went to, where she and some other contributors broke down like the major plot points in different movies. And so I studied that, and then I watched the movies, and I would like fast forward to like the 25% mark of like familiar movies that I kind of knew what went on, and I would see that, yeah, a big thing happened there. And then I'd go to the 50%, and oh, they're kissing, yep, I knew that was coming. And then 75%, there was something else. In the 90%, oh, black moment, they are, we're getting to the climax, it's gonna, so yeah, just watching movies really is helpful. But that book also helped me a lot. Yeah, and so that was fun to be able to go through, because I haven't like gotten it perfect on my other books, but it was fun with It Was Always You. I like scrolled through the Kindle version that I made myself, and I went to the 25% mark and the 50% mark and the 75% and the 90, and like it was just right on. I'm like, yay, I finally got it. So yeah, that's just something fun to play with, and I really liked that book.
That's cool. I'll have to look it up. Victorine, you were going to say something?
Yes, and my suggestion is K.M. Weiland also. But I bought this one, Structuring Your Novel, from K.M. Weiland, and I found it very helpful. She does use all kinds of examples in there from film and things you would know about, and I think it was really helpful. So, yeah.
Michelle, did you have anything?
So I'm kind of funny. I'm a very visual person, and I've read a few books on structure, and it's kind of like the ideas all kind of sink into my brain, but sometimes I just need, the visual chart to really help me. I've mentioned before on our podcast, I really like Jamie Gold's spreadsheet that she's figured out for romance, and we've posted that different places before, I think. But I'm gonna tell you something else tonight. I am a big fan of Pinterest, as a lot of you know. So go and follow me on Pinterest, or just follow my board called Words of Wonder. I love my cheesy name. It didn't start out as a writing board, but it ended up that way. I've pinned a whole bunch of plot structure diagrams that you can go and look at, and a few articles about them as well. And I found a really great one that helps you. It kind of shows you how to fit the hero's journey to the romance structure, which I've talked before about how they don't work. And this isn't perfect, but it's really an interesting article to read because it does kind of break it down as a romance structure too. So it's just kind of like, it's just fun. But it's you know, kind of like a little haven of visual things and some fun articles that you can go look at. I don't know, we can probably post a link to my Pinterest thing somewhere. But yeah, don't get lost, but go have fun. Someone on our group, I think it was Craig, was asking what our favorite books are, and that kind of scares me because I'm terrible at remembering names and authors, and most of my favorite writing books are not plot structure books. So
I have another that I really liked called "Take Off Your Pants" by Libby Hawker. Sounds naughty, but it's not. It helps people to.
Well, only you, Judy, would give us the naughty ones.
I know. Inside joke, everyone. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I really like that one too because it helps like people who have always been pantsers understand that outlining really is a great thing. But one of the main things she talks about is she talks about the try-fail cycle, and then also how the main thing driving the story, or like the character cannot have their happy ending until they have like defeated their fatal flaw. Like their fatal flaw drives the whole story, and I thought that was just really good to kind of remember that the character is super important to the story, and their different flaws and things really drive it as well. So I really liked that, and I try to always like complete my character arcs with, you know, try to always make sure they have some flaw and that they complete it near the end.
And I think it's important because some people, things like story structure or plotting or pacing come naturally to them. But I think it's important to study and know why it works. Why is it what you're doing? Where is it that it works, and why does it work like that? Because, you know, it's good to be informed and not just be like, well, I don't have problems with that, so I'm not going to pay attention. I think as authors, we can always get better at whatever it is that we're doing. So studying is always super important. So we kind of talked about what to do if you get stuck in the middle. I would say I did struggle with my Cinderheart / Inferno book, my first one I ever published. And I do want to put out here that I have been writing since 2012 and publishing since early last year. So, you know, I've been publishing for over a year to finally hit my $10,000 month. So just keep in mind that it's not like I just wrote a book in September, put it up, and it's just sold awesome for me. I mean, it's been a long journey of writing. But I was writing that book and I was like, I kind of got that timeline stuck. I'm a romance writer and I like fast romance. So to me, my characters will fall in love over a weekend. They'll fall in love over a week. I'm not a fan of the fall in love over 6 months and show different months. I get bored of that as a reader because I'm like, well, what were they doing for that whole month before they talked again? Like it just, I can suspend belief long enough to be like, I can believe at the end of a weekend or an end of 4 days excursion that they would know whether or not they really cared about somebody. And I think it's because I also shove my characters together all the time. They're always together. But I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, and so in my YA book, I had like a whole week of stuff going on, and then the weekend came, and then it was Monday, and I needed to get them to Saturday, but I didn't want to show like every day. And I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to get them from Monday to Saturday without showing like the day-to-day mundane things. And I was struggling, and it was NaNoWriMo, and I was like, I got to get my words in. I don't know what I'm going to do. So then I was like, you know what? I know where they need to go, so I'm going to write that scene. And then in writing that scene, I was like, oh, I need to put in this scene before it. And then in writing that scene, I was like, okay, I need to put this scene in before it. And then, so when I started that scene back, I was just like, I just put in a little blurb like, the whole week had passed and she hadn't, she had successfully avoided the guy that she was trying to avoid. And so right then, now, bam, I've covered those 4 days. So for me, if I get stuck in the middle and I'm not sure where to go, I think as writers, we kind of have an idea, the big pivotal moments in your story, there are things that are going to happen. And so write that scene and then try and add that filler scene in between while still making it interesting. But that can help you try and get out of that saggy middle where you're just writing because you're bored and then you have a bunch of words that really don't mean a whole lot. Does anybody else want to talk about what do you do if you get stuck?
Didn't S.K. Quinn talk about the candy bar scene? Do you remember if it was her? Okay.
I barely remember that, but yeah, I don't have a good memory.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about it while I'm perusing my Kindle app to see if I can figure out who it is. So basically, the candy bar scene, she has the author who wrote, maybe it wasn't her. The author who wrote this has this triangle about how to get motivated to write a lot of words. And I think it's all comes down to this. Oh, here it is. Okay. It is Rachel Aaron in her 2,000 to 10,000 books, Write Faster, Better, and More of What You Love. So she has this triangle thing where it's enthusiasm, time, and something else. But the enthusiasm is called a candy bar scene. And it means that there are certain scenes that you go into a story really wanting to write. They're interesting, they're exciting to you. It's something that you can't wait to get to. And then you get to those scenes that are basically the bridges between all those other scenes. And that's where your enthusiasm flags as an author, because you're just kind of like, I know I have to write this scene, but I don't really want to. And so her challenge is to go ahead and make every scene a candy bar scene. To kind of take your time and figure out what needs to happen to make this interesting, what needs to happen to make this exciting. And all it takes is you coming up with some fun thing that it makes you excited again, and all of a sudden you're roaring through it. And that really happened for me with my work that I was doing this week, because I've been struggling to get even 1,000 words a day on this thing, because I was kind of plodding through these scenes that were not as interesting to me. And boom, as soon as I started hitting these scenes that were more exciting, it was just, I couldn't write fast enough. And so I think the candy bar, I always remind myself, okay, make this a candy bar scene.
Mm-hmm. For me, I think when I get like feeling kind of saggy and I don't know why, but it's always right before my kiss scene. And I think it's because I know the anticipation of it, but you can't just jump right into a kiss scene. So a lot of the times I'm having to do that slow build up to it. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. They just need to kiss already. But, as a reader, I know what's going to happen. I play it all out of my head and I'm excited. I can't wait to get there. But as a reader, you want to bring them. And my favorites when I'm like, okay, I'm writing a kiss scene and they're getting close. And then, oh, no, I'm going to drag them back and they're not going to kiss. And then I get them closer. No. So, but it's like that, like, oh my gosh, will they just kiss? So I always find that like hard and kind of drags in that right before the kiss scene that I do. I don't know if you guys feel that way too, or.
I love the build-up. That's my favorite.
I do too.
If there's no build-up, the kiss is dumb. So I gotta have the build-up, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So some of our viewers were talking about taking shirts off to make things exciting again, and you guys know that that's been my joke for a long time. That if things are not happening, I just take the guy's shirt off. So far, I've only taken the guy's shirt off because I am a clean romance writer.
I need to remember that, because I've only written.
Or you have them end up in the rain. I think rain, and in and of itself is just sensual. I don't know why. I just love the idea of kissing in the rain and all this stuff. So you just make a thunderstorm happen, or a hurricane, or make them be in the same area and have it be wet, and you'll be good.
It's so funny because we write sweet romance, but there's no lack of sexual tension, of attraction in what we write, and there are so many elements of that. Um, so I'm going to quote Mary Gray. I don't know if she watches our podcast, but she did a class at a conference in Texas that I went to, and I think she's teaching it at the Midwest Conference in, is it September? It's in September, right?
Yeah.
Yes. She's teaching
Oh
it
my
there
gosh.
too. And she goes through her book and she talks about all the symbolism that she uses of heat to kind of drive that chemistry in her book. And Amy was talking about the sensuality of water, and I tend to do that with my characters a lot. I put them in a pool, or I put them in a hot tub, or you talk about the rain. But one of the things that you can also just, besides trying to build those sensuality and sensual elements in, is make your characters vulnerable, right? I always think that that's when things get really interesting too, because attraction is built on strength, I think, but I think love is built on um, being able to connect with someone through their vulnerability, right? To be able to connect with them about things on that level. And so, and we know that the two have to happen before love can blossom. And so I always kind of think in a scene, what would make them feel vulnerable here? And sometimes it's physically vulnerable. Maybe they're sick, maybe they're shy, maybe they are missing something that makes them feel confident, or something about them has been exposed. But vulnerability can also be on an emotional level too, and that's when it gets really interesting. So sometimes I even try and put the two together where they're physically and emotionally vulnerable at the same time. And so just trying to build as many of those elements in as you can into a scene is going to automatically make it revealing and make the characters act. You want active characters. And I think that the difference between an active and a passive character is really where what we've been talking about kind of boils down to. Like, are they being active or are they being passive in a scene? And characters who are vulnerable or characters who are feeling attraction are not going to be passive. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Make them do something, feel something, learn something, act on something.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the third part of that triangle, in case anybody is like mad at me, is knowledge. So how much do you know about a scene before you go into it? So there you go. I recommend it.
That book is excellent. Yes, everybody should get that book. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
I think I saw on 20 Books to 50K that it's on sale right now for like $1.49 or something like that.
We should get a
go check
commission,
it out.
you know?
Yeah, go buy that book so
Go
we can
buy
make
that
more
book.
money. Victorine, our last question. What is your romance story structure?
All right. So for a class I just did this last month, I decided I really needed to write down what I do for story structure in my romance, because I've had 100 people ask me, what is your story structure? And I don't really I didn't really have a physical story structure that I used. I mean, I kind of have this in my brain, but didn't write it down. So I forced myself to write down what I do as I write. And now all my books are usually right around 50,000 words. So I base my story structure on my word count. So my first 5,000 words usually introduce the main characters, set up the major conflict between the two main characters, and I try to give my characters voice and breathe life into them as I'm setting up them and their conflict and their motivations and kind of the beginning of the book, and give something of a hook to the reader so they want to continue reading. So 5,000 to 10,000 words, this is when I toss in whatever will stick my two main characters together for the book. Now this is kind of fluid because it really depends on what story I'm telling, if that happens in the first 5,000 words. So this is just a rough estimate of what I do. But between 5 and 10, I'm usually showing what is going to force them together, because they don't want to be together at this point in the book, but they're going to have to be together. Either they work together, or they're having a fake relationship, and they have to be seen together, or something happens to force them together. They also have some polite conversations and things like that. They're just getting to know each other just a little bit in that beginning. Nothing is really deep, although I do make sure there's some attraction there. You don't want anything too strong. So between 10 and 20 is when I try to introduce some kind of subplot going along with the characters. And usually subplots that I try to stick in there have to push the romance forward for me, because I write contemporary romance. Most of the book is just all about the romance. And so I don't have a lot of other things going on that aren't contributing to either the pushing together or the pulling apart of my characters. So I can stick in other characters and other things going on, but usually it has to do with that romance as well. It pushes that forward. Something I introduce increases the attraction between them at this point, and I want to have at least one conversation between them where they're opening up just a little bit, but they also have resistance to doing that. And so sometimes I'll introduce something going on with a character where I hint at there's something they're not telling the other person, so that you have anticipation for when you find out what that is they're not telling each other. From 20 to 30 is where I have my midpoint. And so I lead up to the midpoint, and then the midpoint, and then the aftermath of the midpoint. And usually that's where they take their relationship to the next level. I'm a sweet romance writer, so not in that way, but usually they have an emotionally intimate moment, or they realize something about the other person, or something increases the tension and inner conflict between them. So that's usually my midpoint, is something changing a little bit between their relationship. Then 30 to 40, I usually have problems with my saggy part is after that midpoint, and then I'm just like, okay, I really want them to have their dark moment now, but I have 10,000 words in there that I got to put in there. So I just keep forcing my characters together, and I want to increase that emotional intimacy between the two of them. So usually between 30 and 40 is where they reveal whatever they were holding back from earlier in the book, and they have a moment where they talk about some emotional raw things in their life that they need to talk about with somebody that they don't ever talk about with anybody. And usually I resolve some kind of subplot in there. And then from 40 to 45 is where I lead up to the dark moment when my characters separate. And this is where the feelings between them are the most intense, and something triggers them to separate between 40 and 45. And then between 45 and 48 is where I have my dark moment, when the characters are in misery, they're without each other, and they have to go through some kind of personal transformation at this point, to where they realize that they really need that other person in their life more than whatever was holding them apart from that person. And so they overcome whatever in their life that they needed to overcome in order to be willing to go to the other person and say, I need you in my life. And then 48 to 49 is where I have that climax and resolution, where they come together and reveal their feelings. And then the very last 10,000 words is, 1,000 words, 49 to 50 is usually where I do the little epilogue and the resolution, and where I show them in their new happy place and tie up any loose ends that I had put in the book and hadn't resolved by that point.
Awesome. And you can get a lot of this from her book, every time I try to say this title, I can't say it. How to Write Swoon-Worthy Sweet Romance, right?
Yes.
Is that what title's called?
Yes.
And
I will post this in our Facebook group too, so you can have this.
And Victorine has agreed to give us all of the income from these books.
The proceeds.
I'm just kidding. We're learning all about having podcast channels and what that means in terms of affiliate links and all these sorts of things. So now we're all like, pay me for that, and I will. Anyway, sorry. We want to go on a writing retreat for the Writing Gals and have you guys all come hang out with us. That's pretty much why we're doing it. But anyways,
That'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be very fun. Do we have any questions? Live questions, Victorine?
Let me look. I was talking for a while, so I haven't looked. I don't think we have any live questions.
I think I brought up the only one that was out there when it was
Yeah,
on
I
the
think you
conversation.
did.
I think that they're just making lots of really awesome comments over there, so everybody
They
needs to
are.
Yeah.
I'm
It's been a
excited.
great
We had a
time
lot of
tonight.
we had a lot of new people come over from 20 books to 50K. So we're excited to have you here and to join us. And feel free to jump on our Facebook group, The Writing Gals. Check out our website, thewritinggals.com. You can see all of our information. You can stalk us to say, should I really listen to what these people are saying? Or are they crazy and I shouldn't do it? So
It doesn't matter if we're always right. We're always entertaining, right?
No.
You guys get a glimpse into how we talk to each other when we're around each other. It's fun. And then if you're looking for a conference to go to, we will be 3 of us, hopefully 4 of us. We're still trying to get Judy out. We'll be at Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri.
It is in Missouri, where we are
Yes.
at. It's in Kansas City.
It's for the Indie Author Hub, right? And LDS Storymakers combined together. We all 3, me and Michelle and Victorine, are teaching 2 classes each. So, and it's small, what's fun. It's small and it's growing, but it's small, which means you get pretty intimate conversations. You get to sit with people and hang out with them and chat with them. So very, very exciting to be together. It's in September. There's a link. Go to the Writing Gals Facebook group. Just look at, what is it called? In the Author Hub Conference or something like that.
I think they're calling it the Midwest Conference right now. And then it is presented by Indie Hub and Storymakers.
And I am teaching a class about backstory and how to weave it in without boring your reader. And then I'm teaching one about how to write blurbs, ad copy, and log lines that sell. And what are you teaching, Victorine?
I'm teaching the 6-figure indie author class that I taught at Storymakers, and I'm also teaching a new one that I haven't done before called So You Want to Make Your Own Book Covers. I'm just talking about tips on design.
Because Victorine does all of our book covers. So if you want a good book cover, she's the one to do it for you. And Michelle, what are you teaching?
I'm teaching a class called the Indie Advantage, talking about all the awesomeness as an indie author as far as business and why it's a great choice. And then I'm teaching one called Endings That Sell Your Next Book. So it's all about how to write a great ending to your story. And that one is a little bit more intimidating because, there's a lot of ways to end a book. So how do you teach how to do it right? So anyways, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really excited about it. And since I mentioned my Pinterest page, I have a Pinterest board for my dialogue class that I used when I was studying up for my class. And I will be starting one on how to end a story too as I start completing my preparations for this class. So if you follow me, you'll have access to a whole lot of articles that I've vetted and found helpful. I just want to see it benefit somebody besides myself right now.
She's feeling lonely at her Pinterest board.
I have like 800 or something followers over there, but anyways, it's a lot of fun.
Well, you have more than I do. I don't know how many followers I have. I think I'm a Pinterester, but then I really don't. I'm like
I was like before I started writing, and then I started writing.
I don't got time for that.
Yeah.
I try. I just fail horribly at it.
We all have to find what works.
Yeah.
So join us there. Feel free to ask us any more questions. And I think we're good. Next week, we're talking about making your characters come alive. The Frankenstein version of an author. So join us next week. And we will say good night. Thanks for staying up late with us.
Good night.